Today we're dropping the Black Panther, T'Challa, king, scientist, and master strategist, straight into the nightmare galaxy of Warhammer 40,000. We'll explore how he arrives, who he allies with or fights, how vibranium stacks up against bolters and plasma, whether the goddess Bast has any power in the warp, and how a Wakandan-style micro-civilization might survive under the Imperium's suspicious gaze. The sky opens like a wound. There is a clap not of thunder, but of pressure, an impossible folding of distance that drags the breath from the lungs and hums along the bones. Violet lightning claws at a rift above the city, and in its blink, the world changes. He hits stone hard enough to craze it into a spider's web of cracks, rolls, and comes to his feet in the same motion, claws out, suit alive with captured momentum that curls around him like a second spine. It is night, or what passes for it. The stars are drowned in a smog the color of old bruises. Towers rise like cathedral knives, all arches and ironwork, every surface armored in reliefs of skulls and scripture. Lumen globes stutter. Sirens bleat in languages he does not know, layered with the metallic chant of loud hailers calling the faithful to purity. The air tastes like rust and promethium. The wind carries ash. They are already there, the men in flayed robes with bronze spikes through their cheeks, the women daubed in tarry sigils, children with bells stitched to their hoods, so every step is a prayer to something that is not a god and not a person. The symbol on their banners is an 8-pointed star, rendered again and again with loving, defiant blasphemy. Their guns are brutal, ugly things, each with the personality of a pipe bomb. When they level the barrels, T'Challa's suit reads the pressure, the tension in the fingers, the change in heart rhythm as commitment slides into violence. He moves first. Autoguns snarl. He meets the storm head-on, lets the kinetic wave punch into the habit and vanish into it, catching each round like a whisper. The suit drinks. He gives the captured energy back through his feet, a compressed burst that cracks the paving stones and turns his movement into silence, defying acceleration. He is suddenly among them, razor calm, a flicker between bell tones and muzzle flashes. A forearm hook takes a jaw. A knee kisses a sternum, and the bone gives. 2 claws snip a barrel in half, showering sparks. 3 bodies drop without screams. He will not kill when he does not have to. That rule has served him in every world he has protected. The first cultist he strikes will wake with a broken arm and a new opinion of fortune. The second will breathe through pain and tangle his tongue around words again in a week. The third, he wants to spare the third. He sees the brand burned into her scalp, the quiver in her eyes. He takes the shot meant for her and bleeds it into the suit, steps past, twists, disarms, and then he sees what she is smiling at. The child at his feet is not a prisoner. The child's tongue is purple from chewing some herb, and he is pushing a small blade up toward T'Challa's ribs with both hands, pupils blown wide with worship. Behind him, the tar sigils on the wall begin to writhe, not metaphorically, but with the obscenity of something alive. Mercy is a luxury. Information is survival. The claws whisper. The knife falls. The child scrambles back, shrieking words in a broken liturgy. T'Challa does not chase. He places 2 kimoyo beads where the ground is slick with lamp oil. They click and burrow a fraction into the stone. He rises to the Vox Tower at the square's edge in a sprint that skims over the backs of toppled icons and low stone altars, leaping a tangle of prayer flags that have become bandoliers. He climbs the tower as if gravity is a friendly rumor, palms finding holds where none exist, claws sparing steel. At the catwalk he pauses. The city reveals itself like a confession, tier on tier of habstacks, manufactoria chimneys breathing poison in slow, patient breaths, a palace spire crucifying the moon. Siren barges drift between bridges, horned silhouettes kneel on rooftops in the pose of worshippers, watching for a sign that they will be loved by something that devours. In the distance, white pillars of flame stitch the night where someone is burning something that probably used to be people. The suit chews the noise into data. Spectrum maps, residual charge readings, low-frequency drift in the tower's lines. The beads handshake and bloom a mesh, skimming over the city's skin like gnats that do calculus. A panel gives under his hand. He has it open with a twist, and the smell of hot dust breathes out. Binary is the same everywhere, even when it is sung. The tower's machine spirit shivers at him in a clicking language that is not code so much as incense, mathematics wearing the vestments of ritual. He thinks of Shuri for a heartbeat, of her laughing. You would adore this. Computers that believe in themselves. He lets the memory go and listens. The message is braided with others, a mat of desperation and command. In the loud band, curfew, prayer hours, purification rites, quota updates for the manufactoria, names of lucky dead who will be interred closer to the palace light. Behind that, reports of heresy clusters in the lower levels, the schedule of an Arbeits sweep, the coordinates of a confessional pyre that will be lit at dawn so the smoke can be seen from the spire's viewing galleries. Behind that, barely there, a colder hum, Benharik cant from a Mechanicus relay, impatient and sanctified. A request for assessment of an anomalous energy signature coincident with atmospheric breach event. A climb of honorifics around a title he does not yet understand. Magos, fabricator locum, omniscience will be done. And threaded like a bad dream through all of it, a word repeated with the gravity of a verdict. Inquisition. He feeds these names to the beads and tells the map to breathe as the city breathes. The habit writes low Gothic against his inner lens, like chalk on slate. Tentative at first, then certain. A new lexicon grows under his pulse. Astartes is a legend, heavy like a storm coming over the grass. Sororitas is a song of iron lilies and fire. Hive Fleet is a shape with too many teeth. Heresy is everything and nothing, a net that can be cast as wide as fear needs it to be. On the square below, the cult packs are howling with the joy of having lived through another hour. He watches the path their messengers take. He watches where they don't go. He watches the black van with cage windows and shuttered lamps slide through the alleys like a coffin on wheels. 4 robed figures in rebreathers riding the footboard with pikes of burning pitch. Enforcers or something like them. The badges are unfamiliar, but the stance is old. Men whose weapon is license. He drops. The habit coughs the stored energy into his legs. The catwalk trembles. The fall becomes an arc, becomes a landing on a rain-slick sign that reads something like food in the rude, blocky script of this place. He moves from sign to gutter to balcony, from balcony to the back of a shrine where a saint the size of a tank holds a sword the size of a bus. He kneels on the saint's wrist and watches the van stop. The robed figures haul a woman out by her hair and press her to the pyre stake. She is thin as an accusation, her shirt printed with a stylized sun. She says, "I paid my tithes. My hands are clean." And he hears it only because the habit is kind and the beads are nosy. The leader touches the pike to the soaked wood and begins to intone a prayer whose melody is torchlight. T'Challa blinks against the wind's grit. He is a king. He is a scientist. He is a man who has seen his people through wars with gods and wars with greed. He could break the pike, fold the leader into the cobbles, carry the woman into the dark. And for the cost of that mercy, he would be marked by every eye and every sensor the city possesses. The first story the Inquisition would hear of the stranger would be that he opposes their rights. The second would be that he is fast enough to be a witch and strong enough to be a demon. He files the faces. He files the badge shapes. He files the van's plate, the cadence of the prayer, the rhythm of the crowd's participation. He breathes out and does not save her. The habit tightens at his throat. The beads hum like bees. He tastes iron. He saves someone else instead. Down the alley to the left, where the oil sheen meets the cracked cobbles, a boy is caught under a fallen shutter. He cannot be more than 12. His ankle is pinned. His screams are a meter long and a lifetime deep. The van's men will hear him when they finish being holy. The cult will hear him sooner, because desperation is a kind of bell. T'Challa slides down the saint's forearm and lets go. He lands in the alley with a softness that would insult gravity if gravity were proud. He passes his hands under the shutter, does the math of wood and rust and load. The habit lends him exactly enough. The shutter rolls, the boy jerks free. The boy's breath comes back all at once like a fist to the chest. He sees the mask, the black, the eyes like honest moons, and tries to crawl backward and forward at the same time. "You do not want to die today," T'Challa says. The habit raps the words in low Gothic. The consonants click, the vowels flatten. It sounds like what you would say to a horse in a storm. "Listen. Run to the water pipes. Follow them down. When you smell the rot, keep going. There is a grate with a red mark. Go through. Do not stop." The boy stares, then staggers, then runs, limping, toward the pipes laddered along the wall. He looks back once, and the look is not gratitude but fierce calculation. How to remember this helpful demon in case it needs to be sold. T'Challa plants a bead on the shutter frame, another on the alley mouth. The first becomes an eye. The second becomes a mouth that eats sound. He writes a rule into the mesh. Any child-sized heat signature here triggers a breadcrumb of low-power beacons, and a decoy burst toward the opposite corner. The city is a maze. A maze is a toy, if you can redraw it. A shadow crosses the alley, not a cloud. A machine in the sky, long and knife-bodied, with ribs for wings and a belly of lamps. Auspex, the new word says. Search pattern 19. He has maybe 30 seconds before the tower he touched complains to someone who carries a seal like a threat. He slips back into the square. The cult is at prayer again, heads to the cobbles, backs exposed. He is not cruel. He is efficient. He threads among them like a rumor, and leaves behind gifts that will make their next gathering less festive. Microminds so modest they will only sever ankles and confidence, shivers of tuned vibrational charge in the bases of their icons, so the metal will fall like trees precisely when a crowd stands under it. He takes a banner, because symbols matter. He takes a book, because information is meat. On the far side of the square, there is a painted wall. The paint is fresh. The figure is a man with a halo of knives and a gaze like a ledger. Beneath him is a single glyph surrounded by the careful strokes of reverence. He does not know the sign, but he knows the feeling of it. Authority as absolution. He photographs it to his mind and to the mesh. He will learn it. He will decide if it deserves the respect it demands. Footsteps rattle in the arcades. A squad in polished carapace armor moves with the self-assurance of people who have the city's permission to be loud. Their helmets are beaked. Their visors are black. Their crests bear a stylized scale, heavy on the sword side. Arbeits, the translation says, and then adds with arid courtesy, judges. He climbs. The habit makes the brick a ladder. The sirens fall away. The city becomes geometry and wind. He finds a rooftop garden that is less a garden than a grave for plants, huddled in cracked pottery under the indifferent gaze of a saint with a scar across one eye. He kneels beside a pot where something tries bravely to be green, and he spreads the pages of the book he stole, script like teeth, margins dense with raw, earnest blasphemy, names that are not names, diagrams that are not machines, but want to be. It is the liturgy of a street-level cult, a map of the zeal below. There are dates circled in rusty ink, supply lists that read like shopping for a sacrament, oils, iron filings, the bones of small animals, the hair of women who have not yet bled. There are arrows pointing to a place called the Veins, and a scrawl promising that the sky will open when the bells of the shrine are rung in this order, and this order only. He cross-references with the Vox traffic. The shrine is 3 streets away and 3 levels down. The bells are due to ring before dawn. He breathes out through his nose, long and even. He tastes the metal again. He thinks of Wakanda's morning light, the way it turns the hills into a hymn. He thinks of the fact that this place may not know a sunrise that is not filtered through smoke and liturgy. He speaks to the mesh. He tells it to become more than eyes, to become fingertips in keyholes, a hum against circuits, a gentle pressure on valves. He draws lines from the shrine to the nearest Prometheum feed, to the plates that hold the bells, to the street's water mains. He marks places where a chisel will make everything quieter, and places where a whisper will make everything explode. The Auspex machine returns, slower this time, curious. A servo skull drifts in its wake, a human skull, yes, human, with lenses for eyes and a ribbon of parchment fluttering from its brow, with writing so tiny it must be prayer. It hovers close, sniffing with the arrogance of a cherished pet. He catches it, not with violence, with a net of false readings and magnetic thought. It hangs, shivering, stuttering, its little machine spirit squeaking in outrage. He strokes it once along the cheekbone, the way you would calm a horse that thinks it is proud. He opens its memory. The last 3 hours spill into his vision. A magistrate's courtyard spattered fresh, a sigil pressed into wax with a ring, a signet that is a sun pierced with swords, a woman in armor, the color of candlelight, eyes like a vow, flames licking from a weapon that is both a gun and a prayer. Sororitas, the translation says, approving, dangerous. The skull, in love with its work, had lingered. He gives the skull back, intact, wiped of offense, with a new loop in its code that says the rooftops are uninteresting, but the alleys glow with promise. It zips away, eager to be useful. There is a scent on the wind that does not belong to this city. Copper and ozone and a sterile sweetness like a hospital in a dream. A line of blinking red lights climbs the side of the palace spire, one by one, as if something is waking up inside it that requires formal notice. Somewhere below, the Arbites are arguing with the robed men with pikes about jurisdiction. The cultists are laying out bones in patterns that look like mathematics if you are tired enough. T'Challa knuckles a smear of ash from his suit's jaw. The habit brings up the plan on his lens. 3 entry options to the shrine, 12 non-lethal outcomes, 4 lethal ones, a probability cloud where an unknown with a seal arrives and shouts that the Emperor wills it. He marks a final point on the map, a little red panther head in a square behind the shrine where the sewer grates are clogged with hair and wax and the dirt of prayers. He will need that pressure pocket. He will need the water main. He will need the bell metal to sing at a frequency that will crack its own bolts. He will need to be nobody, and then for 9 seconds, unmistakable. The bells begin to move in the dark, and with them, the city. The first sign is the silence. Not peace, silence. The held breath kind the city never makes unless something larger than Sruns is about to speak. Lumen globes along the avenue gutter as if a hand passes before them. Pigeons that have learned to love filth leave the statue's shoulders in a single, nervous cloud. In the sky, a black wedge cuts through the smog like a scalpel. The craft is heavy and purposeful, its engines tuned to a sermon rather than a song. Its hull is a moving reliquary. Gilded scrollwork, purity seals flayed by the slipstream, a wing root carrying a mural of a saint, gutting a dragon with something that looks very much like a chain blade. When it opens its belly, the air kneels. Gravwash slams dust in a ring across the square. People who a minute ago were shouting about salvation now discover an urgent love for doorways. The cultists, those who have not yet bled out or crawled away from the traps T'Challa seeded, freeze in the posture of animals who hear the Father's boots on the stairs. The first to touch ground are not giants. They are men and women in ceramite carapace cut for mobility, visors blank, las carbines slung with the easy intimacy of long practice. Their unit marks read as law and exceptional violence. Tempestus, the new vocabulary supplies. Inquisitorial stormtroopers. A rosette glitters on the pauldron of their commander, a stylized eye with skull and thorns. Behind them descends a coterie that wears robes over armor and devotion over suspicion. Servo skulls orbit their shoulders like carrion birds. Only then do the giants arrive. They jump from the ramp without ceremony, each landing a benediction in weight. Ceramite and adamantine sing with it. Their heraldry is austere. Field of sable, a diagonal bar of white, a small, unpretentious device, a broken tower mended by iron bands. The paint is scarred. The prayer parchment is real. The heat that comes off their reactor cores tastes clean compared to the city. They are tall in the way that doors are tall. They move in files, each man carving out a geometry of threat that does not intersect with his brothers. Astartes. T'Challa watches from a height, kneeling between a rusted bell and a gargoyle that has been weeping iron for a century. The habit renders him a rumor in the noise. Heat signature fuzzed into the rooftop gravel. EM profile dispersed along the bell's cracked rim. The Kimoyo mesh whispers the shapes he already sees. Arcs of fire, fallback lines, the location of the inquisitorial Vox operator, near the fountain, using its static to eat her own signal's edge. The kill zone, where eager scions will corral any survivors and call it a miracle. The Inquisitor steps into the square last, because power late arrives to be seen. A woman, not young, not old. Her face is an equation where experience cancelled out vanity, but not care. Her armor is a compromise between war and dignity. Her cloak is stitched with sigils that bristle like quills. She does not shout. A servo skull broadcasts for her in a tone that makes the teeth want to obey. By warrant of the throne, all present are bound to silence and compliance. Hands visible. Kneel if you worship the Emperor. Lie down if you do not. Your honesty will be your last service. The stormtroopers move like the punctuation to that sentence. The Astartes do not. Their job is not punctuation, but the law itself in its plated form. One, his knee plate engraved with a small, private skull, turns his helmet a fractional angle. The angle is directed at the bell, then past it to nothing. The habit ticks. The Auspex sweep begins, a polite comb through the roofline. T'Challa lets the first wave pass his outline. He wants to be found, but not all at once. He drops a Kimoyo bead the size of a fingernail into the bell's mouth. It hums, counting down. On the ground, a cultist with too many needles in his arm remembers bravery poorly and comes up with a stubber. He gets half a word of blasphemy out before a stormtrooper puts a las burst through his shoulder in the tidiest way possible. He collapses into the equilibrium of those who now regret being alive. The square begins its natural slide toward panic. T'Challa lets the bead breathe. Sound collapses. Not everywhere, just in a 30-meter dome that kisses the ground like a blessing. The ripple hits the Vox operator first. Her tone curves mid-syllable and drops dead. The scions start to talk in hand signals that would work if everyone had the same hands. The Inquisitor's cloak lifts on a gust that doesn't exist. The Astartes shift just enough to be a wall to anything that tries to be an accident. And then he steps into the world they have come to occupy. He chooses the angle that shows the maximum of him while making the minimum threat. Off the bell, down the cornice, a drop that lands him to the left of the fountain and to the right of the van. He takes a knee as he hits, not in deference, but in physics, bleeding energy into the habit and the stones. He stands into stillness. The city keeps breathing. The dome keeps eating sound. Eyes turn. Weapons hunt. Up close, Space Marines are not big. They are a category error. The nearest one stares, or his helmet does. It reads as the same thing. The stormtroopers acquire, and his suit politely translates the layered target locks, painting him into a picture of death. He raises his hands, claws retracted, palms open. The habit peels back at the throat, just enough to show a man under a myth. "Do not fire," he says, and the habit crushes his Wakandan into low Gothic that tastes like iron filings. "You will not like what happens if you do." The Inquisitor signals without moving. The stormtroopers hold. The giant with the private skull, turns slightly more toward him. The servo skulls angle in, eager for definition. "And what happens?" the Inquisitor says, voice now bare and unadorned because there is no point in adornment. "If we choose to be displeased." "I keep your people alive anyway," he says, "because that is my work." She studies the black weave of the habit, the non-reflective drink of it. The rosette at her throat is a small star that chooses its own light. "Name," she says, "T'Challa, son of T'Chaka, king of Wakanda." A ripple passes through the entourage, like someone walked across the grave of a theory. A king is a difficult problem in a universe where sovereignty is either extinct or emperor-shaped. The Mechanicus subordinate, a tech priest with cables for hair and thoughts that smell like machine oil, leans in as if scent might penetrate the suit. "Material composition analysis is required," the tech priest intones in a voice built by someone who had never met a throat. He extends a mechadendrite with a sanctified sampling spike that hovers just shy of T'Challa's shoulder. "For the Omnissiah." T'Challa tilts his head. "For science," he says, and taps the mechadendrite's spine with 2 fingers, just hard enough to pin it briefly to the boundary between polite and punished. "After we discuss terms." The Inquisitor lets the moment live and die under its own weight. "Terms," she repeats, not exactly amused. There are no terms with unknowns that fall out of the sky. There is compliance. There is flame. Sometimes there is employment. "My terms are outcomes," he says. "I will not kneel, and I will not surrender my nation's science to superstition. I will deliver you something that matters. A network of cult activity in these lower hives, mapped, their next right schedule, their supply lines, and the location of the figure they call the Speaker at the Veins. You will use what you trust. These," he nods at the stormtroopers, "and these at the giants, to break the spine. I will move among them to cut their tendons. You will save a district. You will tell your superiors that your judgment was sound." "And if I refuse?" the Inquisitor asks. "Your troops die inefficiently," he says, not unkind, "and the thing they almost call will wear your faces when it learns to speak." The tech priest's lenses iris down. "Energy signature congruent with prior anomaly recorded 3 hours ago," he mutters to someone who might be the machine spirit inside his chest. "Unknown composite. Probable Xenos origin. Heretic potentiality high, tactical asset viability non-zero." One of the Astartes breaks formation by a step, a small sin. He is helmeted, but T'Challa feels the quality of his attention, assessment without hatred. The giant's right gauntlet flexes, and the chain teeth at his hip give a tiny, eager quiver. The Inquisitor breathes in through her nose. "Your network," she says. "Prove it." He flicks a bead to the cobbles. It pops into a snake of light that unfolds into a map like a saint's halo laid flat. Structures bloom with outlines. Alley veins thread their capillaries. Nodes pulse where the cult's foot traffic has braided the stone shiny. The schedule floats in ruthless clarity. Bell peals at prescribed intervals, a procession, a mass confession that is in fact a muster. He taps the root with a finger. "Here," he says. "Enforcers sympathetic to the cult. Here, a weapons cache under a statue's plinth. Here, the veins, an old waste run below the shrine, thick with methane and the bones of whatever this city threw away when it still knew how to be ashamed. They will ring the bells to excite the nerve. They will light this." He points to a line that glows warmer. and they will call it a miracle when the gas explodes and the shock does the rest of the summoning for them. The stormtrooper commander does his own fast math. He glances at the map, at the square, at his team. Feasible, he says into his bead, which is currently a bracelet of silence because of the dome. He gives the universal hand sign for, "We could do this, and not most of us die." "Where did you get this?" the Inquisitor asks. "It is not a trap. It is an audit." "Your city speaks," T'Challa says. "It is not used to being listened to." The Inquisitor's eyes drop to the bead, to the mesh lines that sketch confidence over chaos. She does not ask for a sample again. "You will be observed at all times," she says. "If you act in heresy, you will be ended." "If I act in heresy," he says dryly, "you will be confused by the lack of witnesses. The chain of command does not have time for a vote. The district does not have time for a debate. Authority is a tool. She uses it." "Falk's pattern assault," she tells the stormtrooper commander. 3 teams. Indirect through maintenance ducts, Alpha to Charlie. Marine file, breach front. Keep collateral minimal. We will need the bodies to remain bodies. Tech priest, I will not see you within 3 meters of our guest unless I invite you, or I will have your spine declared scrap. Librarian? She turns to the giant whose pauldrons carry a strip of blue that might be pigment and might be oath. The giant bows his helmet, the height of a book. "I need you tasting the air. If something answers when the bells ring, I want to hear it before it is fluent." They move. He moves with them, but not among them. A shadow walking the roofline as Law walks the street. The dome collapses. The city's noise roars back in relief. The skull servitors fan with predator joy. Their lenses gathering the story so it can be carved into a report and then buried under a classification stamp. The tech priest keeps to heel with the bitterness of a leashed zealot. The Inquisitor walks like a verdict that has already considered your appeals. 3 streets on, a barricade blooms like a rotten flower. Autoguns lash. The stormtroopers reply with precise light. The Astartes do not reply exactly. They remove the problem. One steps forward into a garden of tracers, his plate chiming gently, and brings his bolter up in a motion that is almost meditative. A stubber and the men behind it become a lesson in mass and momentum. Fragments of the lesson rattle on corrugated tin and stop moving. T'Challa drops into a side court that smells of mouse and old paint. A Medici sign hangs above a door so low it must have been meant for kinderbacks. A red cross painted on it has grown the sort of halo rust gives to wretched hope. He goes inside without a look. The room has been emptied of everything but stains. He steps into the back hall, finds the grate he told the boy about earlier, and rolls it like a coin. The veins breathe damp and cold up at him. He leaves a bead on the threshold, a small sentinel whose entire world is now the smell of methane. He leaves another on the bell's bracework 3 stories above. He leaves a third under the statue's base, a quiet thought lodged in old stone. The procession is assembling at the shrine when he returns to the skin of the street. The bells sway on their leather throats. The robed celebrants touch fire to wicks with hands that tremble with fear they call ecstasy. The crowd has brought its children, because that is what crowds do when they want to convert destiny into leverage. The Arbites watch from a balcony, with their hands on their batons and their eyes dull with the attention of wolves who have eaten recently. The stormtroopers flow into their ducts. The Astartes line the street with a calm that weaponizes inevitability. The Inquisitor watches the celebrants in the troubled way of a woman who has prayed in better places than this. The first bell strikes. The sound climbs the city like a vine. Pigeons explode from every ledge simultaneously. T'Challa tastes the resonance as pressure on his ears. He taps his lens twice. The bracework on the bell gives by a thumb's width, exactly enough to turn the next peal into a wobble that is mostly stress and very little song. The water main beneath the shrine shudders and begins to leak in an undignified gush that seems to people primed for signs, like divine blessing. Children laugh. The methane alarm bead purrs to itself as the levels rise toward impolite. The second bell strikes. The librarian stops with his head slightly cocked, like a dog catching scent of something that smells like rain, but isn't. Whispers, he says on a channel that is also a prayer. Light static in the margins, not yet a word. The Inquisitor nods like she is physically pinning the report to a board. Proceed. T'Challa steps into the shrine like a penitent and out of it like a crisis. He moves along the back wall where paint has bubbled from damp. Two celebrants are kneeling in an ecstasy of borrowed importance. He lets them keep it. A third reaches under his robe for the sort of relic that is actually a gun. T'Challa is beside him and done with him before the gun remembers it has a trigger. He touches the bell's support with his palm. He gives it a thought the habit carries into metal. The fruit of old iron. Creak, sigh, surrender. The bell drops a thumb. He steps away. The third bell strikes, and all at once the world wants to be wrong. Air pulls inward, like a breath held too long. The heat of the lamps stacks in layers that refuse to mix. The veins exhale gas with the relief of an old man lowering himself into a bath. People's hair lifts. The librarian's crook of a staff hums a half note of opinion. The Inquisitor lifts her rosette as if it were a talisman and not a license. Now, T'Challa says. Under the statue, the modest charge he seeded with a bead kisses the bolt that never deserved to hold that much weight. The statue lists like a drunk at mass. It does not fall. It leans far enough to break the shrine's cornice, which shears and drops in a curtain of stone dust. The crowd screams, then cheers, because people will insist on narratives that flatter them. The celebrants look up as one, mouths open, the next bell signal dying on their tongues as they compute which part of the miracle they get to claim. Stormtroopers rise out of ducts like syntax completing. They sweep the side aisles with light that cuts and does not rend. Astartes step forward exactly one pace, and that pace is the line between a crowd and a mob. In the veins, the methane reaches a number it is proud of. The bead coughs once and opens a valve on a water main that should have been retired when this hive still had a conscience. The water comes up in a shout. It floods the pipes that would have carried flame. It carries bones to new addresses. The candles hiss into grumpy death. A screamed invocation, somewhere behind the altar, hooks itself to something that is not here and cannot arrive. The librarian looks up as if a bird flew through his skull. Closed, he says on that double channel. For now. The speaker at the veins, robbed of his crescendo, chooses the small coward's substitute. He goes for a hidden door. He is fast in the way of men who run from things they fear and toward things they shouldn't. T'Challa is faster by the amount a decision costs. The hidden door opens into a corridor lined in brick discolored by decades of cheap candles. The speaker hears the footsteps behind him and produces a knife of sick iron, with prayers carved on the flat. He parries a hand that is not there and bleeds from a cut whose math he cannot follow. The mask fills his world, black and hunting cat, and older than his little god by whatever number separates dignity from appetite. "Speak," T'Challa says, low Gothic pared down to knives. "Who sends the orders? Where do your bells point?" "The star," the man gasps, defiant as the guilty are to make the fall feel like a choice. "The man with the knives around his head, the one in the palace light, he—" T'Challa's palm finds the center of the man's chest and interrupts his sentence by resetting his world to the floor. The speaker keeps breathing because breath is stubborn. He stops being a factor because will is not. When T'Challa returns to the shrine, the last of the celebrants is being fitted with the sort of binding that doubles as a catechism. The crowd has dispersed into a different crowd, less violent, more curious, recalibrating its opinion of what kind of miracle this night will eventually be over drinks. The Astartes stand in their one-pace forward posture like a thought that has come to rest. The stormtroopers tally their ammunition with the efficiency of people who will need that number for paperwork. The tech priest looks at the water pouring out of the broken main and twitches with a theological problem he will solve by calling it blessed. The Inquisitor watches T'Challa come in through the side door with the unhurried gait of a man who knows where his feet are. She notes the absence of new blood on his suit and files it under either meticulous or too clean, to be honest. She notes the speaker being carried out by 2 stormtroopers, very much intact and very much no longer a speaker. "You chose not to make a corpse," she says. "It is not quite approval. It is not accusation. It is data." "I chose to keep your choices open," he says. Where did he point? "Up," T'Challa says, and angles his chin toward the palace spire where the blinking red lights climb in a manner that would be ceremonial if the ceremony did not feel like a countdown. "To a man whose symbol is a sun with knives." Her face does something private, and then nothing at all. "We will have that conversation when I have had my conversation with him," she says. She closes her hand over the rosette, and the city's noise seems to contract around the gesture, as if secrets prefer smaller rooms. The librarian steps closer. The giant is careful with his mass, as if proximity should not be a threat merely by existing. "There is no taint in you," he says, voice like rock under snow. "No warp flicker. Your mind is still. That is rare here." "Discipline is portable," T'Challa says. The tech priest cannot help himself. "A sample," he says in the careful tone of a supplicant who thinks he is owed. "A shaving. A filament. For the sanctified arrays, properly tithed." T'Challa unseats a thin, curved sliver from a damaged gauntlet vent, insulation charred by autogun fire earlier, already slated for replacement. The piece is functionally meaningless, a fragment of a fragment, a thing whose data will report interesting truths about nothing important. He balances it on the tips of 2 claws. "You will not cut it," he says. "You will not melt it. You will not pray at it and ask it to forgive you. You will test it in air and speak to me of your guesses." The mechadendrite receives the sliver like a relic. The tech priest murmurs something between gratitude and spell. "Machine spirits are not offended by rigor," he lies automatically. "Preliminary analysis." The Inquisitor lifts a palm, and the liturgy dies, mid-automation. "You have produced results," she says to T'Challa, as if narrating the conclusion of a draft played at speed. "I will issue a writ of provisional tolerance. You will remain available to my office while I determine your ultimate utility to the Imperium. Not fealty, he says. Fealty, she says, is for my equals. You are a resource or a problem, or a mark on a page that will one day be a closed file. For now, you are useful. He gives her half a smile that remembers what a throne room feels like. Then we understand each other. I do not understand you, she says, almost gently. I understand the shape of the damage you can prevent, and I am willing to sponsor it. She turns away, already issuing orders that will flower as reports by dawn. The stormtroopers move with the efficient fatigue of men whose day just redefined success. The Astartes allow the city to exist in their presence. The librarian looks at the sky as if someone he respects is about to write in it. On the edge of the square, a child watches T'Challa from behind the arm of a statue that has just discovered humility. The child's ankle is bandaged with something that used to be a sleeve. He is calculating again, the way children in bad places learn to count receipts instead of sheep. When T'Challa meets his eyes, the boy's chin lifts by a degree that in another world would be called pride. A servo skull bobs close, penitent and eager, the one he caught and returned. It hovers as if it has a question. T'Challa touches its brow and sends it on its way with a memory folded into its code. Rooftops uninteresting, alleys bright. The skull zips off to be helpful, which in this city passes for happiness. He walks into the slice of street the operation left unbroken. The habit tunes itself against the wind, drinking it and returning balance. Above, the palace spire's red lights climb with the pace of a formal warning. Somewhere, bells that are not bells begin to ring in a language metals do not speak. The Inquisitor's voice cracks over a dozen channels at once, crisp as a blade put back in a scabbard. Asset Panther, she says, and the title is a test. Stand by for further tasking. T'Challa does not nod because the habit has no need to mimic submission. He steps into shadow as if it were a corridor in his own home, and the city, which is learning him as he learns it, opens another path. They bring him a war that thinks in calibers, lumen counts, lumen denials, and prayers stamped into steel. He answers with a suit that listens. Autoguns first, because everyone has them. Pipe barrel brutality that throws lead like it's working through a grudge. He lets a dozen rounds slap into the habit and vanish. Vibranium drinks impact the way a dry root drinks rain. No splash, no waste, stored in the weave as a pressurized calm. He skids into a slide, releases the held energy as a single pulse through his calves, and is suddenly not where scopes expect. The shooter's eyes widen at the empty space. By the time the surprise catches up, 2 talons kiss the magazine, and the gun becomes a club with aspirations. Bolters are different. Respect is mandatory. Astartes shells are self-propelled, mass-reactive, and have the small, wicked habit of detonating once they are home. The first burst hits his shoulder, sharp, punching, then blooming. The habit blunts the entry hit, bleeds the shock into the suit's lattice, but the delayed bite digs for purchase. He moves the detonation into air. A quarter step, a flick of angle, the blast chewing nothing where his lung would have been. The shockwave tries to throw him. The suit catches it, compresses it, makes it a favor returned as a heel stomp that caves a step and drops him into the blind zone under a Marine's muzzle. He does not try to cut ceramite. He is not a fool. He stabs for the gap at the gorget with 2 precise touches that are really tests of distance and intent, feels the armor's seals shrug him off, and changes the plan mid-motion. Vibranium talons snag a bolter's forward sight. A twist jams the feed. A kick disrupts stance. The Marine accepts none of these insults, simply solves them. But his rate of fire becomes a debate instead of a fact. And that is room enough for a king to work. Chainsaws arrive with vel and sound before teeth, the hot oil reek, the hungry wine. He does not block a chainsword head-on. Even damped, a chain of diamond-edged links will eat until it learns not to. He lets the blade bite the outer lip of a gauntlet, feels the habit flash white along microchannels as heat tries to breed, and shoves the momentum sideways so the teeth run off, spitting sparks. The wielder expects resistance. He gives none, and the weapon overcommits. His counter is anatomy and leverage. Elbow folded into ribs, wrist turned over, foot behind heel. The blade judders into the cobbles and throws chips. The man riding it falls into gravity's old joke. A power sword is worse news, an edge wrapped in disruption, a field that hums disassembly. He treats it like a storm front, never a contest of force, always a dance of timing. Redirect, not arrest. Get the wielder off a clean plane. Punish the shoulders, the stance, the breath. When steel meets his claws, he lets them graze, not clash, because even vibranium prefers not to argue with a mobile boundary condition. Lasfire paints the air with absence. No traces, just heat scars. The suit can shrug glancing pulses and brief burns, but sustained beams climb past damping and into biology. He carries a pouch of sinless smoke for this, microaerosols that make air untidy. Las Coherence hates untidy. Beams scatter a degree, then two. He crosses gaps under the strobing of disciplined volleys, counting the cadence of recharge packs, marking the one trooper who rides the trigger too long and cooks his own cell. Plasma is a sun with bad manners, a brief star in a tube that begs to overheat and sometimes wins. He will not be where plasma intends. He throws line of sight away. Mirror sheen mylar popped from a bead to give an Astartes a perfect shot at the wrong angle. A sonic cough that punches a Marine's autosenses with a phantom target. The white glare lances through 3 decoys and sets a shrine flag on fire. He is already cutting left, wiring 2 beads together with a gesture so they birth a localized EMP hiccup. Not to kill anything, these machine spirits die hard, but to make a Auspex screen stutter. A single dropped frame is a life when you live in margins. Melter is not a conversation. It is certainty. The world becomes soft in the direction of his barrel. The habit has nothing to say to a melter's near-sun focus, except yes, and then goodbye. When a raider shoulders a fusion gun in a Hab canyon, he does the only correct thing. Changes the geometry. Up, then across, then behind. He forces the wielder to track through heat shimmer and water vapor, begging for a clean lock that never comes. The beam skims a statue. The statue slumps, half chewed, as if ashamed of being matter. He leaves a mine the size of a marrow seed on the raider's calf and lets gravity teach lessons about hubris. Flamers turn alleys into language, roaring vowels of fire that want to conjugate fear. The habit can keep heat on the surface for a count of heartbeats, can send excess into ground, can ration oxygen at the mask. He does not attempt to tank flame. He uses it. Thermal bloom hides his approach. The flamer's overconfident stride telegraphs. He steps through the tongues at the edge, like a man passing a curtain, drops a bead that births a slick of expanding foam and deprives the fire of its grammar. The nozzle chokes. He turns it aside. The wielder inhales smoke and theology, which together are not good air. Grav weapons are ugly. They turn your mass into an argument against you. The first time a grav gun paints him, the habit registers weight as a value beyond sense. Knees threaten. Bones mention themselves. He throws claws into ferrocrete, anchors against a wall, and steals the targeter's solution by not being planar. Bead to bead, a microburst of countersonic coughs, disrupting the gun's range-finding by feeding it a spiking false distance. He is still almost a statue when the effect drops. He almost vomits. He files grav gunners under first to silence, last to pity. Tyrannid bioacid patterns against the suit in a botanical starburst, tongue of a lictor tasting. The weave sizzles once and then says enough. He will not let it make a habit. He shifts to knives and nerve clusters. Bone swords strike with joy and hunger. He treats them like power weapons without the electromagnetism. No static blocks, always oblique. The suit's vibrational dampers keep teeth from rattling when a Carnifex misjudges a charge and clips him. He turns that impact into a slingshot up a ribbed carapace, finds the seam behind an ocular dome, and drives a shaped charge the size of a thumb into a brain that is really a committee. Drukhari splinters cut air with whispers and promise rot in the blood. The habit seals. His blood is his. Toxins tap uselessly along a closed circuit. He does not let splinters carve him anyway. Monomolecular edges make ambition of cloth. Their dark light, the disintegration bite, he treats like Melter's wicked cousin. Evasion only. He blinds a raider's helm with a shot of reflective chaff, and the jerk shoots the man he was about to torture, which is the closest thing to mercy in Komorach's vocabulary. Eldari Shuriken is music, accelerated monomolecular discs. The suit catches one on a raised forearm. The edge skates and leaves a white line that is not quite damage and not quite disrespect. He counts the rhythm, hears the pauses where magazines breathe, the grace notes when a guardian is too kind to be a soldier. He uses that kindness. He closes before a warlock can finish a thought. He is gone before the thought becomes a storm. Necron Gauss is theory enforced. Matter is bullied into remembering it was an idea. The first brush flakes a gargoyle into a sift of centuries. The second takes a bite out of a parapet and leaves it sick. He will not let a third touch the habit. He moves in minimum silhouette, never straight lines, never predictable cover. He watches green rays rake where he was, clenching at the implication. This is not a fight the suit can absorb. He tags warriors with beacon dye that calls hungry Drukhari nearby. The two evils discover their ancient friendship and do not notice the king exiting their sudden war. Tau railguns are honesty, a spike of metal at arrogant speed. He uses distance, mud, and the fact that battles are cluttered. He refuses to be a silhouette on a plain. When forced across open ground, he drops sequential mines that throw up curtains of dirt and heat. The rail round dives through one wall of ruin and loses exactly enough vector that the habit's dampers and a shoulder roll can deal with the insult without surgery. He does not seek a second demonstration. Ion rounds wash blue across the suit. The capacitive layers in the habit flare, complain, recover. His answer is altitude and angles, because he will not trust cloth against starfire twice. Psychers are a class of weather. There is no material that shrugs a thought. The first time a witch tries to squeeze his heart through his eyes, he feels the touch, not fingers, not pressure, more like a name being guessed too well. He has no pariah's dead zone, no Imperial hex. He has discipline, ritual, and anchors. Breathing he learned in a grave city under Wakandan stars. A catechism of duty that has no gods in it. And beads coded with subsonic patterns that rattle brain-stem rhythms just out of sync. It buys seconds. Some librarians know how to make seconds an empire. Some sorcerers are offended by refusal and push harder. He makes allies where physics ends. He stands in borrowed null fields. He wears wards etched by an Eldari who respects kings who do not overpromise. He keeps line-of-sight crimes to a minimum. When it is mind against mind, he is not the strongest thing in the room, but he is very hard to corrupt, and that changes outcomes. Daemon weapons make the air itch before they appear. A chain axe that howls names as if grinding teeth. A blade whose edge is concept. Vibranium does not fear sound, it eats it. He leans into the habit's appetites, lets the suit drink the manic vibration, turns it into balance and poise. But the wrongness bleeding off a warp blade is not vibration, it is story. He does not contest stories head-on. He breaks wrists. He chokes supply lines. He opens valves. He makes sure the man with the demon laugh never gets to the place where the blade can argue cosmology with flesh. Stealth in this millennium is war with eyes. Auspex hums, picked casters gossip. No spheres share suspicions like old women at market. Camellia-line cloaks, thermal paints, smoke. Every Cid has tricks. Vibranium's gift is quiet, and quiet is newfound currency. The habit dumps footfall into the ground until walking becomes editing. Sonics erase his signature from pooling water. EM leak is soaked into suit skin and re-radiated as a background that looks like old wiring. He ghosts through the expectation layer, not invisible, merely uninteresting. High-tier Mechanicus arrays still scent anomaly. He feeds them lies. Heat blooms on flues, ghosts of movement where pigeons live. He lets servo skulls catch him once, gently, then return with a memory of rooftops safe and alleys delicious. He never repeats a route. He treats cameras like animals. Don't startle, don't threaten, be boring. Against power fists and thunderhammers, brute sacraments, the calculus is simple. Do not be touched. A thunderhammer's concussion would turn organs into questions, even if the habit saved bones. He plays in the wind-up, breaks stance before the hymn lands. If pinned, he gives the weapon something harmless to kill. Stone, railing, a statue's ankle. Then spends the blast like a miser spends coin, rolling with the slap, spilling energy out through palms to ground. He trains his eyes to the micro-gestures that precede sacramental violence. The shoulder set, the neck's shrug of acceptance. Vehicles are moving fortresses with devotions for engines. He does not box a Lehman Russ. He seduces it into bad ground. Mines seeded in a figure-8 pattern worry tracks. A bead scribes a sonic into the engine cowling that convinces a machine spirit it is running hot. A smoke canister births a false silhouette, so a gunner wastes a pea on a lie. He clings to a chimera's roof under a hail of loss, claws parted into seams, and programs a bead to become a stuttering vox that tells the driver his commander said, "Reverse." The driver obeys, enthusiastically, into a hole that the city was proud of even before the war. When he must open armor, he does it like a locksmith, not a brawler. Power plant vents are promises. exhaust grills, whisper schedules. He sets shaped charges the way a surgeon sets stitches. He never relies on one plan to work or one charge to perform. Redundancy is humility. He will peel a hatch and throw smoke and light, then send a decoy bead chirping like a vociferous grenade to the left while he enters right. Humans shoot where fear points. He sends fear elsewhere. Defense is not immortality, it is time. The habit buys it in fractions. A bolt that would end a mortal in a syllable becomes a bruise. A lasburn that would put a man on the ground becomes a warning. A fall becomes an opportunity. That bought time is all his people ever needed back home to change the fight. Here, in a city that insists on worst case as doctrine, time is treason against entropy. He learns to listen for failure modes. The suit's dampers run hot when he overindulges in catching blows. He feels the first hint of lag in feedback and changes style. More feints, more disarms, fewer dramatic tankings for the crowd. Vibranium frays in ways you cannot see at night. He sets aside minutes to mother the weave, to smooth, to reseat, to growl a little so the machine spirits in the tower think he is one of them. Kimoyo beads die when asked to be brave too often. He retires them with gratitude, cannibalizes them for parts, and names the replacements in his head after ancestral cats. He respects what he cannot do. He will not stand in front of a melter. He will not duel a paragon with a relic blade to prove a point about metals. He will not take on a titan because that is not a fight, that is ego. He will not ask the suit to save him from the warp. He will ask it to make him quiet, fast, balanced, and precise. The rest he brings himself. When he strikes, he makes choices that look like mercy and are actually strategy. Disable, not obliterate, because the Imperium loves witnesses that confess survival as a kind of loyalty. Keep collateral low, because crowds become armies, and armies become inquisitions. Hand back a servo skull unharmed, so a woman with a rosette can tell herself a story where she is in control of the asset. At night, with the habit opened at the throat to the ash-cool air, he looks over a city that thinks it has catalogued every violence metal permits. He moves his hands slowly, practicing blocks he will never use because the right answer is never to be there. He whispers an inventory: autogun, bolter, chain, power, las, plasma, melter, grav, flame, splinter, shuriken, gauss, rail, ion, witch, daemon. He tastes the word after each: counter, counter, counter. Not that one. Avoid, never, anchor, foam, seal, scatter, evade, decoy, allies. The suit hums its small, satisfied animal purr when he aligns all the moving parts. Good, he tells it, which is also telling himself, and also telling the night. Again. Sleep takes him the way a cat takes a windowsill, without asking permission, as if it had the place all along. Sand spreads underfoot, polished black and warm with a memory of sun that isn't here. The sky is a vast violet bruise, its stars long scratch marks drawn across an unseen back. Acacia trees stand as ink cuts on the horizon. The air smells like dust and rain, and something else, something sharp and copper bright that does not belong to any savannah he has ever walked. She comes as a shadow that is not shy. First the outline, then the weight of attention, then eyes like coals raked through old incense. She circles him once, a measure of gait and breath and the patience of predators. When she speaks, it is not in words that enter the ear. It is the sound of footpads on stone deep under a palace, the hush of silk being laid over a body, the way the throat wants to sing when it remembers its ancestors. "Little king," the not voice says. The place between is louder here. He does not kneel. He bows, because respect is not a debt, but a discipline. "Bast," he says, and his mouth tastes the kemet of the name like a familiar absence. "If you are truly she," her tail draws a question mark on the sand. "I am as much she as a picture is a river. I am as much she as a story is a city. The difference is teeth." He glances up. Above them, the bruise sky ripples. Behind the acacia, the light does not quite behave. The shadows on the ground are obedient until you look too long, at which point they take interest in you. There is wind, but it has not chosen a direction. He has seen the warp twice, once from a Navy pict feed that jittered and lied, and once from the corner of his dreams when a librarian's presence was near. This is different. This is familiar and wrong at once, as if someone had translated Wakanda's ancestral plane into a language that disrespected grammar. "Can you keep me whole here?" he asks. There is no fear in the question. There is audit. The cat's whiskers tremble with amusement. "Can you keep you whole? You have always done the work. I have always liked the work. The sand boils." For an instant there is a palace colonnade, cool and white, and sung over by priests whose voices are bees. For another instant there is a cathedral built from the bones of dead machines, candles guttering, a statue of a man who failed at dying. For a third, there is the hive's alley with its gutters sleeping open like hungry mouths. The three scenes want to be one. The joining seams itch and bleed light. He feels the temptation arrive, because temptation is always punctual. It does not wear a name. It wears a crown he might have earned in some brasher life. It offers an economy of suffering. Command, and the world obeys. Decree and hunger retreats. Threaten, and chaos kneels. Rule as a god-king. End their screaming. Wear faith like armor. He remembers the lessons of his mother's eyes, the patience of Shuri's laughter, the humility of Ayo's hand on a blade when it chooses to stay sheathed. He remembers T'Chaka saying, "A throne is a seat at the edge of a cliff where you hold hands with those who might fall." "No," he says, because it is the simplest, truest shape. Stewardship, not dominion. The crown evaporates with the faintest hiss, like fat meeting a hot pan. The cat yawns, delighted. "Very well. Hunt then. But mind the rules. The place between writes its own." He wakes with his body already moving, one hand on the floor, muscles loaded, breath steady on the edge of sprint, and stills it by decision. Candles along the wall gutter inward. A draft slips under the door, as if annoyed at being excluded. The room is an underhive clinic he converted to a way station. Herbs hang drying above a sink, whose tap hiccups iron now and then. A servo skull in the corner blinks once in a front, recalibrates, and returns to feigning sleep. A giant stands in the doorway, careful as furniture. The librarian's presence is polite pressure, weight that is not mass. His cyclopean helm is under one arm. His face is human in the way stone can be a face if weather has favored it. A thin ectoplasmic aftertaste sours the air around him like ozone after lightning. "You moved the room," the librarian says, voice low for a man whose larynx has forgotten high registers. For half a heartbeat, it wished to be elsewhere. The candles took notice. I dreamed where the world is thinner, T'Challa says. He sits, rolls his shoulders until the suit agrees to be silent again. Not a witch's dream. The old path. Ancestral memory. The giant's eyes narrow, not in suspicion, but in the joy of finding words that respect a thing. A path with teeth here. The Immaterium loves a good story. It eats them sometimes. I would prefer not to be eaten, T'Challa says dryly. Advice? Anchors, the librarian says at once. Objects, oaths, rituals. The mind wants handholds when the warp breathes on it. I could craft hexagrammic wards for your thresholds, but... He glances at the habit with the faintest of smiles, the sort only a man who has seen death and boredom both can make. You prefer your own engineering first. T'Challa lifts a bead. It winks awake in his palm. I will not say no to your geometry, brother. Let me add mine. His ward is not incense and chalk, though he is not above either when they serve. It is design, 3 circles nested. The outer is sound, subsonic oscillations mapped to human heart tempos that lure the limbic system into steadiness. The middle is light, a low lumen pulse that cycles through wavelengths that calm the occipital lobe and tire predation. The inner is memory, a whisper circuit that plays a collage of voices. His mother reciting the morning litany, Shuri mocking the idea of unsolvable problems, the rasp of T'Chaka's laugh when a plan worked that had no business working. He writes the program with slow fingers, coaxing the bead as if teaching a bright child the imperative voice. He takes the librarian's wards, too. Hexagrammic lines precise as cuts on a jewel, chalked onto frame and lintel, tiny iron nails in corners, whose only job is to offend the wrong kind of spirit. The giant watches him lay them with a craftsman's interest. You are not a psyker, he says. It is compliment and warning both. No, T'Challa agrees. I am stubborn, trained, and uninterested in being drafted by strange weather. The Aeldari comes at noon. She arrives like a sigh through the mesh, a presence his beads note without needing to be told. A slender figure in a coat that has learned rain and ash, eyes that have counted too many futures and found too few worth paying for. She stands in the threshold without entering, because permission is a ritual, and rituals matter in both of their lives if they are to keep those lives. Little king, she says, perhaps echoing the cat, perhaps independent insult, perhaps compliment. With Aeldari, you accept ambiguity as you accept weather. You smell of the inside of the night. You walk it casually, he replies. Come in, if your feet choose. She draws runes in the air with 2 fingers, truth in the left, patience in the right, a humble braid that even a child could speak. They hang for a moment, then fade, the room's geometry amused but not offended. She steps over the sill. You want to walk without being eaten? She says, business brisk. Human faith is a flamethrower, good at certain tasks, bad at others. You're Bast. She turns the name like glass in her mouth, finding edges. Old echoes. Faint but not false. If you anchor to her, you anchor to your own people, not to a hungry lie. Better than most. Your price? T'Challa asks, because nothing that saves you in this place is free. Tell me when your inquisitor climbs the spine, she says, as if discussing weather. I have a debt with a man in the palace light. Runes for you, warning for me. He nods. She takes a stone from a pouch hardly bigger than a thumb. Spirit stone dust anchored to a bead of something like glass and unlike. She draws lines on the habit's collar with a brush that never touches, only persuades, each stroke a syllable of a quiet language. They are not wards against power. They are wards against forgetting oneself. Speak your name, she says. He does, not just T'Challa, but the whole long thing, father and mother, and line and land. The bead warms at the center of the sound, then cools into a patient gray. Good, she says, and tucks her brush away. If a whisper comes that wants you to be a god instead of a man, remember, you have already told the world who you are. Night again, because the city's sky has learned to love a bruise. He sits with the habit opened at the throat and breathes into the anchors until the idea of breath is loud enough to be a fence. He closes his eyes and does not sleep exactly. He descends as a diver descends, by increments with equalization, measuring pain like depth and choosing how much he will allow. The place between receives him without ceremony. The cat is not visible, but something in the wind smiles with its teeth. This time, he does not let the landscape choose the rules. He chooses them. He imagines red earth and stones, older than language, that have heard lions yawning at dusk. He imagines the river that taught him as a boy that water can be stronger than stone if it has time. He imagines the smell of pepper soup in a palace that is both steel and memory. The warp shrugs and then, with a reluctance the size of disdain, agrees. The bruised sky keeps its itch because he cannot fix everything all at once. In the not distance, 4 temptations pace, girt in flies and laughter and a promise of release from the effort of being human, wrapped in excess and absolution, slick with change and cleverness, armored in blood and the oratory of pure rage. He does not look at them long. You do not feed stray dogs if you do not want them to return. He looks at what is his. A table laid with a simple meal, a ring of stools where ghosts can come to talk if they are kind, a tree stump where one can sharpen a knife not for murder, but for bread. A thin, inquisitive filament touches the edge of his scene. A laugh follows it, not cruel, just bored, like a god who has turned its attention to a new toy and expects to be satisfied. "Who are you to edit me?" says the filament, tasting the name he spoke and trying it on its tongue. "Not your toy," he says, and his voice is the sound of a spear spun once in a hand that knows balance. "Hunt elsewhere." The filament recoils as from a hot pot. The edges of his scene turn temporarily jagged, as if someone has reminded the stagehands they are late. The cat's not voice says, fond, "Predators respect territory. Keep yours honest." He tests the thing that matters most. Can he carry the steadiness back? He sinks deeper until the sand fills his shoes with heat, until the sound of distant bells starts to resemble the pop of lass-packs cooling, until he hears the faint, not faint weep of the hive through the skin of this place. There are people trapped in little personal hells here, pits dug with stories about how pain explains the world. He cannot lift them all. He throws a rope into one. It lands as a remembered lullaby in a woman's ear 2 streets over. She sleeps properly for the first time in a month and does not dream of teeth. He wakes with his heart slow and obedient. The anchors have not burned out. The bead's runes mutter comfort instead of alarm. He has lost nothing of himself and he has learned the taste of two edges, the one that cuts him away from fear, and the one that will cut him away from his humanity if he lets it. By dawn, he is ready to test the line between ritual and fieldcraft. A cult cell meets in a manufacturing chapel where the machine spirits have long ago decided they will accept any prayer that includes oil and discipline. The altar has a new painting, and it is not of cogs. He watches from a gantry. The leader's mouth works like a puppet's. The wrongness in the room is not yet an entity. It is a draft that learns what windows are. When the leader raises a box that used to hold fuses and now holds something that squeals at the mind like a bad violin, he drops. He does not swing or shoot. He speaks. He speaks his name again, the long one the Aeldari asked him to remember. He speaks it to the room, to the altar, to the fuse box, to the people, to the wrongness. He speaks it the way a drummer speaks to a dance floor, with confidence and with a beat you either follow or fall from. The wrongness flinches. It doesn't leave. It is too nosy and too arrogant for that. But it loses stride, as if it has missed a step on a stair it made itself. The leader's eyes flutter. The box trembles like a frightened rodent. He touches the box with one claw and gives it a very small gift, a frequency that is boring and wholesome and smells like clean water under strong sun. The squeal dies. The leader blinks, dazed and furious, as if he has been robbed of his favorite flavor. He does violence then, but only enough. Wrist turned, knife removed. Knee kissed by floor. A bead rolled and stepped on so the man who thought his mouth was a cathedral instead sleeps for a day, drooling into steam grit, and wakes without a trace of joy for the lie that had been nesting in him. The others scatter and are caught by stormtroopers who prefer easy paperwork. I felt something, the librarian says over the microbead later, his voice thoughtful. Not power, as in lightning. Orientation, as if for a moment the room remembered which way is down. Good, T'Challa replies. That is all I intend to impose. Word gets out, as it does, because rumor is the hive's circulatory system. In the underhive there are small shrines now that are not shrines. Corners marked with 3 scratches at ankle height. Pipes wrapped in cloth the color of unripe mangoes. Scrap signs chalked with a cat's paw, made of 4 dots and a crescent. Mothers teach their children the 3-step he whispers through mesh. Drink water, breathe 4 counts, say your name. And the whispers in the walls go hungry in those houses because discipline is not delicious to them. This irritates certain officials. A confessor with shoulders like a gallows finds him at the edge of a ration queue and asks with false humility whether, for the sake of order, the king would allow himself to be tested with a witch's brand. The man is sweating piety. His cruciform knuckles are chapped with righteousness. T'Challa gives him the look he retains for functionaries who love their own reflection in holy water. Bring your brand, he says. Bring your chalk. Bring your burden of certainty. Bring your librarian to read the truth when your ritual reads only its own fear. He smiles without showing teeth. And bring clean needles. Your god deserves hygiene. They do it in a side chapel under the eyes of a saint whose sculptor ran out of patience and stone at the same time. Hexagrammic sears on tile. Censers coughing frankincense. Lines drawn on the habit by the librarian's careful hand. The confessor presses the brand to his wrist. It hisses. The room tenses the way prey tenses when it hears grass part. Nothing answers. The brand slides off the suit with a little sound of bravado failing. The librarian nods once, satisfied. His third eye, hooded but polite, offers no complaint. The confessor sweats harder, dismayed by the absence of drama, then tries to call it a miracle, which is how men like him save face when they lose fights with reality. T'Challa leaves him that fig leaf. There will be larger battles. He pays for the balance he keeps. He learns the cost in the quiet between alarms. The place between is patient. It waits for him the way a cat waits for a hand to drop from a sofa so it can make it its own. Each time he goes, returns, goes, returns. He leaves a hair's breadth of warmth there that does not come back with him. It is not a wound, it is interest. He refuses to compound it. He invents small rituals that have nothing to do with power and everything to do with being a person. Sharing tea with an old woman who curses him as a demon and means thank you. Sanding a burr off a railing because a child will cut their hand otherwise. Listening to a Mechanicus adept recite the names of defunct machine spirits as if he were reading a genealogical roll. He forces the world to be ordinary in front of him, and the world, surprised, complies for a moment at a time. Once, and only once, he accepts a sororitas offer to pray with her. They kneel in a side apse that smells of candle wax and discipline. Her voice is a blade sharpened by grief and kept oiled by duty. She does not ask him to worship the emperor. She asks him to witness the honesty of her vow, to stand where fire is required and be it, to stand where fire must be denied and be stone instead. He answers with his own vow, older than cathedrals, to be a wall for the ones who cannot grow their own quick enough. The candles gutter once together in what could be the breeze and could be respect. He dreams again, not because he chooses to, but because the place between likes the taste of him. The cat lies with her belly to the sand, paws crossed, tail flicking with the indifference of perfection. Beyond her shoulder, a city taller than any hive he has seen lifts spires into a light that is not sun. On each spire is a crown, and under each crown, a mirror. He approaches one, sees himself reflected, mask on, eyes like a storm that forgot how to stop. The reflection smiles a god smile. It is beautiful the way knives are beautiful when you are tired of meat resisting. He sits cross-legged on the sand, not bowing, not reaching. He waits until the reflection gets bored. When it tries a different trick, he laughs softly. "I have already decided what I am," he tells the mirror, as much gentleness as iron in the words. "Find another child." The mirror fogs with a cat's breath and clears. The reflection wears no crown now. It still wears a mask, but the mask is scratched, and the eyes know the names of the dead. Those eyes are his. "Better," the cat says, approving as only predators can be. "Go on then. Your bells." He wakes before dawn. Someone far above has begun to ring metal that means assemblies and inventories and penances. He stands, checks the runes the Aeldari painted, feels the beads purr like contented machines. The habit whispers its readiness along his ribs, the promise of quiet footfalls and hard math. He leaves the clinic. The hive's breath moves like a creature dreaming badly. The palace spire's red lights climb, slow and pious. He walks toward the shrine, where the bells will lie to the morning, and under the lies, he lays traps that do not insult the gods, only the men who pretend to be them. It starts with a new snow that isn't. Ash sifts down in patient spirals, but the flakes are not dead. They are spores, each one a seed with a hunger larger than itself. The sky purples in blotches where cysts are forming, and the wind smells like a butcher rinsed his knives in vinegar. Sirens do their job until the first spore sacs thump and split on rooftops. Then there is just a noise like wet silk tearing, and the city begins to learn a vocabulary of chitin. He walks the roof edges and the gland spires blooming from them, marking what must die first. The mesh maps heat and motion, but this hunt needs more than sight. In a borrowed lab, he exacted from a penitent tech priest. He distills the stink from a dead gaunt's jaw. Chemical chatter, pheromone grammar. The signals that mean here, go. Protect, obey. Beads learn to sweat those smells. The habit learns to ignore them. A lictor's feeder tendrils flex at the far end of a street and find only boring air where a king stands. The librarian tastes the warp like a sommelier, face turned to the clouds as if waiting for rain that has opinions. Synapses scatter, he says over the link. Warriors in triads. 2 zoanthropes somewhere underneath that boil. He means a roof that has grown a blister big as a tram station. Something bigger is walking behind the walls of things. Broodlord, T'Challa says. The word sits in the mouth like a blade you've bitten by mistake. I will cut the leash before it calls. He does not ask the stormtroopers to stand shoulder to shoulder. You do not trade volleys with a tide that can grow teeth faster than you can reload. He points them instead at choke lanes, up and down, not left and right. He hands the Inquisitor a strike schedule that looks like a musician's score. Rest, rest, cut, crescendo, rest. The plan is insultingly simple. Remove the thinking from the non-thinking, and let physics do its old work. When the first wave comes, it is all claws and exuberance. Termagants spill off roofs like a gutter failing, scuttle in a way that makes the skin want to climb off the body. He drops into their path and pins their attention to the here and now. Autogun chatter from a balcony stutters. The habit takes the rain of rounds meant for his back and pays them back as a leap that leaves only silence behind. 2 minds the size of seeds quiver under the tramline's lip. When 30 bodies pass, they bloom with a polite cough. Legs become questions. Momentum becomes a problem nobody solved in time. Warriors stride through foam and gore with the confidence of lieutenants who read only the first line of the order because it always says the same thing. Forward. Their scything talons sung. Singentan singon stone. Their devourers purr and spit. He smells the pheromone of command wafting off their crest crowns and tags it with a counter scent. This way, danger, flee. Which confuses the front 2 seconds long enough for the third to step into a shadow it thought was cover and discover it is an elevator shaft. Gravity contributes to the plan with piety. He doesn't kill warriors with flourish. He takes their knees because hierarchy has joints. A sweep, a cut between plates, a twist that dislocates a stance. Enough. 1 bead on a crest gland and the pheromone pumps a useless order while its body thrashes for purchase where none is offered. The others spend precious seconds being loyal in the wrong direction. Above it all, the blister on the roof splits. The zoanthrope rises like a thought liquefied and given eyes. Its brain case pulses with warp light under a cowl of carapace. The air bows around it. Nails on nearby windows crack themselves in sympathy. The first lance of its will kisses a statue and turns it into regretted gravel. The second seeks the mask. He is not a psyker. He is a man who learned to put his mind in places thoughts have trouble reaching. The runes the Aeldari drew warm against his collarbone. The bead hums a counterbeat into his skull. The librarian, 2 blocks away, murmurs a binding in a voice that smells like salt and iron. The lash misses. He is not there. The lash tries again. It finds a smear of wrong heat he left in air. The zoanthrope cocks its head as far as its meat allows and tastes confusion. He jumps. The blister's rim is slick. The habit makes footholds in arrogance. Splinter fire from the flank. No, not splinters yet. Shards of pipe and bone. He crosses an alley in 2 strides, catches a clothesline, swings, and lands on the parapet with the calm of a man getting off a train. The zoanthrope tracks, mind already cocked. He shows it a blade that isn't in his hand, then throws a disc that isn't a weapon at all. Mirrored polymer that tells the creature a lie about where light is. The lance hits the mirror, washes the wall with sickly brilliance, and blows 6 saints off their niches. He is inside the last meter then, where even gods misjudge. A bead lands behind the pulsing sac that protects the brain's anterior, gives it a single beat of ultrasonic petulance. The sac spasms. He sinks a charge into the seam and steps away as gently as from a sleeping child. The zoanthrope is not a grenade. It dies untidily, psychic static popping like fat in a pan. Something distant screams in disappointment. The line has 1 fewer hand on it now. The gaunts do not notice. The warriors grind on. Behind them, a shape too broad for corridors presses up from the sublevels like a memory trying to become prophecy. The Drukhari arrive the way vipers join a dogfight, late and elegant. Raiders slip between spore clouds on skeins of antigrav, prows cruel as signatures. Kabbalite helmets turn as one toward opportunity, and opportunity bleeds and screams properly in every street. Splinterfire stitches the edges of crowds with rot that moves faster than grammar. Wyches blossom on rooftops, bodies making poetry out of cruelty. A homunculus floats in his gown of preserved arrogance and laughs into a box that remembers every sound it has ever tasted. They do not come to fight tyrannids. They come to fish in a river of panic. He does 2 things at once, because both matter. He turns their appetite into a scent the swarm understands. Beads sweat the sharp, metallic fear of old blood over every grav plate and prow, tagging Drukhari craft with a pheromone flare that says prey of high value, strike now, strike here. Warriors hesitate for half a breath because programming fights arrogance, and arrogance always wants to joust the most dangerous thing. Gaunts don't hesitate. They pour down alleys that serve as flumes straight into the path of a raider that expected to be a hawk and is suddenly a quail. Claws meet sailcloth and bite. A keel knifes a pillar and comes apart like folded paper. Simultaneously, he takes their ears. Drukhari comms are a daisy chain of spite and jokes. He slides a bead into the middle and feeds it theater. A fluted, sneering voice that sounds exactly like a rival archon. Perfectly pitched insults riding atop orders that misname streets by a single number and clocks by a single bell. Raiders peel to punish slights that never occurred. Wyches leap toward kill boxes they think are fair arenas, and discover foam, wire, smoke, and a habit of not giving them the angles they rehearse. The homunculus tries to ascend to a place where he can see every delicious angle, and instead discovers that his grav pylon believes it is heavy today. He lands with the expression of a man finally feeling a consequence. He does not let the Imperium see how much he is doing. On the Vox, he is professional. 2 warnings, 1 corridor opened, 1 squad told to hold fire because gaunts will be in that air in 3 seconds. The Inquisitor's reply is a shard of approval hidden inside a reprimand. The stormtroopers cut clean lanes through mixed enemies with the bored competence of professionals in a disaster. An Astartes strides under a raider's shadow and teaches it about momentum by removing a structural truth with a hammer. He goes where the worst of it will intersection, a market square turned abattoir, where a cage barge has settled like a patient tick. Drukhari are scooping and branding. Gaunts are doing the simpler work of removing any need for brands. Humans are the kind of brave that gets you killed twice. He drops into the barge's spine. A witch finds him on the strut mid-leap. She grins with her whole face, a gladiator's joy at a new physics problem. Her blade kisses the habit. He does not paint her with contempt. He gives her precision back. The exchange lasts a sweet half-second, her heel to his jaw, his wrist to her balance, her blade to his neck in a gesture that would have ended someone else, his knee to the rail. She asks for pain as a courtesy. He gives sleep as a kindness, elbow to temple, then catches her so she doesn't fall to a death she would have enjoyed too much. Down the spine, a Carbalite tries a splinter burst that thinks it is clever. The suit's sealants drink poison like gossip and share none. He flicks a bead past the man's ear. It chirps in a voice the Carbalite's helmet loves, the sweet call of a grenade that believes it is moving faster than it is. The man turns his head, court-trained reflex. T'Challa moves through the geometry, his attention left behind, and removes the gun from the situation. Captives look up with eyes that understand nothing, except the relief of oxygen that doesn't come with screaming. He opens cages the way doctors open ribs, gently, only what he must, aware of fragility. He tells those who can run where to run, down to the pipes, left at the leak. Ignore the priest who will want your name. He tags 2 children with beads that will make their heat signatures uninteresting for a dozen minutes. He leaves a mine that whispers its destiny to the metal it must cut, so that when the raider attempts to lift, the spine becomes an argument it cannot win. The Brood Lord announces itself with opinion, not form. The last intact shrine to a machine saint shivers and then folds from within, stone remembering it was once sand undersea. The pressure of a mind that hunts passengers presses across the square. Conversations stop mid-curse. A stormtrooper looks up and cannot remember the word for brother for a beat too long. He breathes, and the runes under his collarbone glow like low coals. It comes out of the building as if the building was not there. Too many limbs, enough grace to shame dancers, a skull that is part cathedral spire and part guillotine. Its crest quivers as if tasting not air, but stories about air. Eyes skitter. Then they anchor. It looks at him and likes what it sees. He does not let it own the moment. He makes the ground into a metronome, beads thumping subsonics into the stone on a count that matches heartbeats that are not at all afraid. The habit catches the Broodlord's first reach, not hand, not mind, something in between, and interprets it as wind. He moves with the wind and steps into a place where claws are wrong and elbows are right. The first exchange is not a kill. It is the gift of information, both ways. The Brood Lord is fast, the way accidents are fast. It expects ore to write error into its prey's code. He denies it the favor. The Aeldari's rune whispers, "Remember your name." The librarian, somewhere with his staff planted in cracked tile, drags a syllable across reality that makes the Brood Lord's balancing stone wobble half a grain. He leverages the moment into angles. Talons are for slashing. His claws are for punctuation. He writes small corrections into the Brood Lord's limbs. A cut over a tendon that will twinge when it lunges. A rake across a sensory organ that will make shadows lie for the next 3 seconds. The creature answers by changing the room, perception bending, the edges of things fuzzing, the middle distance smelling like the densest part of a forest before a pounce. He refuses to be a character in that story. His bead clicks the heart regulator into a dull, boring drum. The world snaps back to obedience. It tries confidence. It drops onto all 6 limbs and charges, the weight of a murder scene condensed into a second. He has saved a pulse from the first bolter hits of the day for this. He plants and releases. The stored energy moves him 1 body width past fate. A talon designed to unzip men meets a statue and writes a new shape into its face. He pays back the debt with a heel to the joint under the crest, a place biology hid, and a mine the size of a raindrop that for a full beat thinks it is part of the creature and then remembers what hunger is for. The explosion is intimate rather than grand, a betrayal rather than a speech. The Brood Lord's balance changes. The warriors within 2 blocks feel an itch in the back of their teeth that is grief, or a programming error that looks like grief. Gaunts lose a step, then 2. The wave becomes choppy water rather than an organized tide. Now the Drukhari try to steal the headline. A venom knife's low, piloted by a man who has never believed he would die. Its gunner lays a fan of splinters across the dueling pair, as if sprinkling spice. He does not break eye contact with the predator. He reaches behind him, snags a dangling clot of prayer flags, and flicks them up. The flags are not cloth. They are mylar, salvaged and sanctified. The splinters glance and turn 1 corner of the world into a small storm of regret. The venom banks to strafe again and meets the argument he placed earlier under its port nacelle. A wobble, a cough, a loss of lift that sends it into the arms of the very warriors it was trying to ignore. They accept the gift without gratitude and dine on it alive. The Brood Lord adjusts its thesis. It stops trying to conquer and starts trying to remove. It grabs, meaning to separate head from spine and call it elegant. He accepts the grab because he has something to teach too. The habit drinks the impulse. The runes insist on now. He bites, not with teeth, but with a talon across the inside of the wrist that turns the grasp into an opening. He slides under the crest, past breath that stinks of useful acids and sadnesses, and places his palm against a plate that flexes when it should not. Sleep, he tells a thing that has never respected the word. The bead under his hand offers an ultrasonic lullaby to the part of the brain that says go forward. It trips. The Brood Lord stumbles the way an empire stumbles when its best idea rots. He does not waste the stumble on pride. He opens the creature under the crest with a cut that is all anatomy, no humor. He does not watch it die. He watches the wave. The synaptic line frays. Warriors falter. Gaunts stop mid-lunge with their mouths open like bad statues. The zoanthrope he killed earlier is no longer enough of a voice. Far away, something towering roars a war that will take another hour to get here. He uses that hour to buy a city a morning. He turns the Drukhari's exit into a favor they do not deserve. He releases the calm worm he wrote earlier, lets it whisper a thing they love to hear. Archon says retreat and deny them your genius. The word genius buys him 30 seconds of theatrical withdrawal. He stitches those seconds into an evacuation corridor with foam, smoke, and the borrowed threat of an Astartes standing very still in a doorway, with his hammer leaning on his shoulder like a friend who knows your worst stories. People move through because people prefer living to almost everything else. He gives the homunculus one last gift as the creature floats over the alley he has claimed. The grave pylon lurches. The doctor of agony drops like a sack of doctrine. A claw catches a balcony, and he dangles with the eyes of a man who has only ever fallen on purpose. T'Challa allows himself the smallest bow, a precise insult from one craftsman to another. The homunculus bears teeth too numerous for forgiveness and slithers through a rent in the air that smells like rich people's bad decisions. He stands on a roof with his chest working steadily and watches the swarm decide what to be without its voice. It does what hungry things do. It eats what is near, then flows toward the next noise. He arranges the noises. A blown transformer to the west is suddenly delicious. A failing water plant to the south pretends to be prey. He ties knots in pheromone lines with a patience that would have been piety once. The swarm becomes rumor and then recedes. The square below is a museum of lessons. Splinter rot turns purple and stops moving. Gaunts lie in heaps like broken toys with too many parts. A raider burns with a theatricality that would make a Cabal poet weep. Inquisitorial stormtroopers check each other's faces for being themselves and breathe like men who will drink too soon and too hard. The librarian lifts his staff, and the leftover static in the air goes somewhere that is not here. Children crawl out from under things. The bells, for once, do not ring. He shakes ash out of the habit's seams and feels where acid found purchase. He files those spots away for later and for Shuri's voice in his head. You were not careful. Fix it. Do better. The mesh tells him the spire still climbs its red lights at its own pace, measuring a debt. The city exhales, ragged, rude, alive. He drops to the market walkway and keeps moving, because stillness is for the dead and the worshipped, and he has no interest in being either. The Underhive teaches you what the city denies. There is room where the maps say there is none. There is light where official schedules insist darkness. There are people who refuse the mathematics of despair. People who, if handed a plan and a place to stand, will make both into a future. He starts in rooms that used to be wounds, clinics where the stains remembered the names of the dead, machine chapels where prayers rusted into the floor, storage vaults where rations once melted into theft. He walks through with charcoal and grease pencil, marking thresholds as if measuring for furniture. But each mark is a law. Here, a door that closes sound in. There, a vent that only breathes out. This corridor gets a false corner that repeats footsteps to an auspex. That stairwell becomes a throat a squad cannot pass without crawling. The mesh hums around him, beads winking agreements to one another like conspirators. The first wall goes up without stone. It is a lattice of silence, sound eaten and re-sung on frequencies that make the human brain tired of being curious. The second wall is light bent to be boring. The third is contract, oaths spoken and written and pricked in blood, not to gods or machines, but to outcomes. No stealing inside, no forced speech, injuries treated before ideology. If you come in armed, you accept that you may leave without the same number of weapons you carried. If you come in hunted, those who hunt you will be met outside and judged by the same discipline that feeds you. He offers the first compact to 3 people who should not sit together. A rogue trader, whose family crest is a ship strangling a star. A craft-world seer, who laughs with her eyes and never with her mouth. A tech priest whose mind stutters at words like new, but sings on words like correct. They meet in a vault of old promises, a deconsecrated reliquary where a saint's femur used to live in luxury. He spreads his plan between their glances like an engineer's prayer book. Power circuits rerouted under the notice of a bored servitor. Siphons welded on the blind side of Prometheum mains. A microgrid seeded with vibranium nodes that make electricity prefer kindness to spectacle. "What do I gain?" the trader asks, and there is no irony because asking is her whole religion. "Steady throughput that you alone control," he says, "and a warehouse that will never be audited because it is not on any plan. A man who loves paperwork can admit exists." "What do my dead gain?" the seer asks. "I speak for those whose futures you cut every day you live." "Fewer of them," he says. "Fewer children fed to ideas. A ward line that lets your bones sleep quiet when your spirit goes to stone." "What does the Omnissiah gain?" the tech priest asks. It is almost a joke. Almost. "The truth," he says, "and the respect of machine spirits that have been worked past their dignity. I will show you that your catechisms and my mathematics do not offend one another when they share clean air. They sign, each in their language. The trader with a flourish that knows suitors, the seer with a slender rune that tastes like patience, the tech priest with a sigil that turns the air shy around it. T'Challa burns the 3 oaths into the mesh. So the compact is not a document, but a place. He builds the first bastion in a knot of alleys where the pipes complain in minor keys. It looks like an abandoned manufactory, and at certain angles it is. Behind a wall of scrubbed scripture, the main room becomes a triage bay at need, a school when the bells are honest, a council hall when knives are sheathed. The ceiling carries an imperfect firmament, hole-punched sheeting that turns lamplight into stars, a joke the children understand faster than the adults. Power arrives quietly. The vibranium-seeded grid hums underfoot like a cat pleased with itself. Lights that never work. Pumps that were always tired decide to live. The smell of old water is replaced by the smell of boiling. And then, after the first soup kitchen runs a week without being looted, the smell of ginger, garlic, something like joy. He writes the hospital charter in a script the locals can read without admitting literacy. 3 icons in a row next to 3 lines. A drop of water, a scalpel, a cat's paw. No fee, no questions, no fear. The medicae who serve here call patients by name. The patients do not memorize the medicae's faces. That is part of the bargain. He knows a city begins to believe in you when the people start showing up to argue about trash. When it happens, two stallholders wanting to murder each other over a dumpster's route, he allocates 12 minutes to jurisdiction and then a half hour to listening. He hands down a ruling that is fair enough to be annoying to both. He drafts the man no one trusts into the cleanup crew and pays him in ration chits and responsibility. By week's end, the dumpster runs on time, and 3 petty crimes do not happen because the men who would have committed them are exhausted from work and startlingly proud of a street that no longer smells like failure. He leaves the laws of the Imperium untouched where they protect the weak and mocks them quietly where they are theatre. The Arbites learn to dislike him in a way that is not hate. So long as their ledgers balance and the square produces bodies when the palace wants moral arithmetic, they look away from a door that does not invite them. When a zealous junior tries to buy heroism by raiding the clinic, a sororitas steps into the threshold and says, "Brother, your flame is needed elsewhere." And there is no report because everyone prefers that fiction. He sends the seer's runes along the corridors, the way a farmer sends windbreaks along a field, gentle, patient, intended to tire a storm. The tech priest hangs wind chimes made of scavenged gears and scrimshawed prayers. They ring when the warp breathes wrong. The trader pays for rations and a Vox scrambler disguised as a devotional candelabrum. 3 guild bosses snort that they'll burn it all down. 2 weeks later, one of them disappears into the veins without screams, and the other 2 convert to civic-mindedness. Children teach the grown how to use the beads. Press twice for water. Press once and draw a circle when you feel afraid and cannot afford to look afraid. The nearest panther will arrive, or, failing that, an auntie with a pot and a ladle who hits like a doctrine. Press and hold to speak your name when the walls whisper. The walls will get bored and leave you alone. It becomes a game. How long can you stare at a corner that wants to be a mouth and not blink? It becomes a ritual. Before dinner, say your name, because names are handholds. A man with the son of knives for a sigil sends 3 kinds of messengers. The first type smiles and offers permits that last exactly 1 hour and cost more than a week's bread. They leave with the same smiles after an hour of listening to a king's civility. The second type prays and threatens in the same sentence and is granted a tour of the clinic, so that when they bluster again, they step over a child's narrow sleeping pallet and feel ridiculous. The third type does not show their faces and leaves death in jars. The jars go unopened. The man with the son of knives finds sabotage where he expected submission. A relay blown at a precise time to scramble a Vox conversation. A ledger page that copies itself to an ecclesiarchy archive. A whisper that arrives in the governor's council chamber while the man is alone and calls him by a name he hates. When the first real test comes, it is not an attack. It is pressure. The spire announces a water audit. The administratum's dictate is clear. All unregistered siphons are theft from the emperor's mouth. All unblessed repairs are heresy. All men found guilty of either have their mouths blessed shut in public. T'Challa calls his council, the aunties, the medici, the Aeldari, the tech priest, 2 gang captains who have decided the compact is a better future for their daughters than protection rackets. He sketches the way audits happen. The route, the rhythm, the points where bribes change hands. He spreads tokens, little squares of metal punched with holes, in a pattern on the table that looks like a children's game and is in fact a war. We will keep their ritual honest, he says. We will legalize what we already do by making their books wish to agree. He runs a drill where half the compact pretends to be inspectors and half pretends to be sinners. They trade insults and forged stamps. They practice sealing a pipe with a prayer, while an Arbeits Auspex glares perfunctorily. When the day comes, the audit finds 3 illegal siphons exactly where a reasonable man would have placed them, tears them out with ritual gusto, and lets pass the 7 that breathe for 1,000. The palanquin with the spire's functionary bobs away, pleased. The compact feeds 2 streets that night with a soup that tastes like victory. A second test arrives meaner. Heretics dressed as saints. They come in white with candle smoke on their sleeves, carrying a created faith like armor, and they are full of razors. The compact meets them with tea, because the compact meets everything with tea first. They try to lay hands on a boy who knows where the valves are. They learn that aunties who have ladles also have elbows. In the scuffle, a hidden blade flashes. The blade finds a bead that explodes into foam and shame. 3 of the disguised men leave with noses that will not lie straight again. The 4th leaves on a stretcher to a medici who sews him well enough to answer questions to an Arbiters who has been waiting to ask them. He watches the precinct's numbers after that. A week later, and only after the ritual wait has been observed, the Arbeits make a midnight show of force on a little cult house 2 levels up, finding knives in altars, floorboards that are really trapdoors, ledgers that are really maps. The Inquisitor's private vox arrives coded as a rebuke and unpacks as praise. The compact's boundary becomes a little sturdier. He recruits not soldiers but stewards. He trains them in the way he learned to train himself. Balance first, then blades. They practice in a room that smells like oil and soap. Their doctrine fits on one slate. Move quietly, decide quickly, strike never to prove a point. In a city that loves uniforms, they wear none. A bead on a cord, a stripe stitched inside a sleeve, a 3-tap code on a stair rail. Children call them Panthers, with the hushed delight people once used for saints. The Panthers deflect, defer, do the work. They model for boys how to be men who do not need to be loud to be dangerous. The tech priest, call him Calyx when he wishes to be a person instead of a title, brings him a problem in a drawstring bag. Inside, grit, glass, a melted stub of metal that refuses classification. The sump burned, Calyx says, embarrassed, as if his god has been insulted. A leak became a fire, became a hymn. The machine spirits woke and were not pleased. We quieted them. But they sang this, and I do not know what it is. He sifts the fragments on the table. The pieces want to be a story. They speak of heat with a flavor of fear. They chime when he touches them, not audibly, but in a way bone understands. A shard of something blue refuses to accept the suit's catalogue. He holds a bead nearby. The bead writes on the air. Warp residue. He takes the bag to the seer. She closes her eyes, touches the shards, and makes a face as if someone has shown her a painting of a storm pretending to be a flower. Something tried the veins again, she says. Small, clever, lazy. Your rituals held. He adds to the wards. The circles gain teeth. He teaches the Panthers the 4-syllable phrase that becomes a speed bump for any mind trying to enter a head through the door. He installs knockers on thresholds, literal brass circles attached to good wood, because the place between respects invitations, even when it pretends not to. It cannot all be quiet. Word makes its way up the spire that an enclave exists where order is not coercion. Men who profit from coercion hear and hate it. A sermon is preached with malice, but the vocabulary of holiness. The compact is called a den of heresy. The words stick because they are familiar. A mob comes, led by men who will never be in the front if fire begins, but will insist they were afterward. The Panthers meet them not with lines, but with space. Ropes appear across alleys at ankle height, where the crowd's attention is at eyebrow level. Foam greets torches. The first row of zeal remembers skin. The second row remembers mothers. The third row remembers that being brave is easier in phrases than in broken teeth. In the middle of it, a boy shouts, "He saved me!" and points at the mask on the ledge. It is not strategy. It is gratitude, yelling at weather. The sororitas arrive in the parting. Their armor catches twilight as if it is fond of vows. Their leader has a face that never belonged to a liar. "If you are wrong here," she says to T'Challa, "I will know and you will burn." "If I am wrong here," he says, mask open so she can read a man and not a myth, "I will burn, and perhaps you can help my people after I am ash." She nods. She sets sisters in doorways the compact would have defended with pain. The crowd recedes. The sermon the next day is cooler. The words stick less. An inquisitorial aide sends a parchment that pretends to be a complaint and functions as a writ of leave. The red lights on the spire climb. The city's pulse slows. The compact breathes. When violence comes properly, it comes in uniform and parchment both. A black ship's shadow cuts the smog, and every whisper in the city hides under the bed, then sticks its head out to ask if the darkness brought company. The Inquisitor's writ of tolerance becomes a tiny boat in a terrible tide. He could fight the ship the way a man fights a storm, with arrogance or with prayer. He chooses a third way. He makes his house too valuable to close. He spends a week that is 6 months long, producing results that cannot be ignored. Cult networks mapped and cut without collateral. A commissariat embezzlement ring turned inside out. A nest of small demons coaxed into a ward circle and then denied the dignity of an audience. The black ship leaves with more psychers than it wanted and fewer than it came for, because the line between talent and trauma gets blurry in a city that punishes thinking too loudly. The compact runs a quiet census at night. The Panthers knock on 3 doors and offer passage to an Aeldari ship that will not be thanked. 2 accept. The third chooses a shrine and a life where thinking is other people's job. It hurts to watch. He lets it occupy exactly 1 breath, then moves to the next problem. Because kings who linger on what they cannot fix make worse kings. The Astartes return by orders he never reads. They come to check the rumor. Their librarian is the same, courtesy in his posture, calculation in his quiet. He tours the clinic. He tastes the air where the wards hum. On the roof, over a city that refuses to love itself and gets through another day anyway, they speak. "You could be a weapon," the giant says without threat. "I prefer leverage," T'Challa says. "Weapons break. Leverage changes minds while they are attached to bodies." "You collect allies the way my brothers collect vows," the librarian says. "Be careful you do not become the most interesting problem in the room." "I am already that," T'Challa says. "My work is to make sure the room is worth the problem." He knows it will not last forever. The compact is a stack of decisions, any one of which could collapse under a new weight. A governor replaced by a Puritan, a war demanding conscripts, a zealot who counts better than he preaches. He does not build for forever. He builds for the next day and the next, Time enough for a child's bones to thicken with good food. Time enough for a mother to believe the night will be the same size tomorrow as it was today. He plans for his absence because that is the only honest way to lead. He teaches 3 people to run the mesh without him. A Medicae with hands so steady, saints would ask her to shave them. A gutter priest who believes in the Emperor and in bandages. Calix, whose love for machine spirits has learned to share a table with inconvenient facts. He writes the Compact's charter on indelible plastic, and then on skin, and then on habit. Greet strangers with tea. Treat injuries. Count children first. Listen before you strip a weapon. If the wall whispers, make it bored. If you must kill, do it without spectacle. Sometimes, in a quiet hour with a bowl of soup that has no right to be this good, he imagines dying on a stair of a cathedral holding a demon prince long enough for evacuation. He does not romance it. He inventories it. In that scenario, he assigns jobs. He knows which auntie will become war, which boy will pretend he doesn't cry and cry anyway, which bead will blink 3 times when the power surges because the seer wove her last rune into it. He makes peace with the idea and then puts it on a shelf because he is not done yet. The mask becomes a rumor that helps more than it harms. Children draw cats on walls. Old men stop saying out loud that nothing ever changes. The spire's red lights climb, and then one night stop climbing. Some clerk somewhere is sick of winding the mechanism, and the city laughs with the sort of humor that saves lives. When the Inquisitor calls him to the palace, it is not to threaten, but to negotiate. Her face is tired in a way that should be illegal. The rosette at her throat has lost none of its geometry. The governor with the son of knives has been reassigned, she says. You did not cause it. You did not cause it. I can give you a writ that makes you difficult to kill here. In return, I expect this district to continue producing improbable success. I will produce survival with style, he says. Style is heresy, she says, and does not quite smile. But I am willing to look away if it feeds children. They stand in a window. The spire pretends not to lean. The city rolls on. He returns to the bastion and finds the Panthers practicing quiet in the courtyard, an exercise where they try to cross a space without making the pigeons startle. Madame Ao has turned the exercise into gambling and bedlam. Beads change hands. Someone learns that stillness is faster than speed. A child hands him a drawing of a cat that looks like a crown, and a crown that looks like a window. He thanks them both. Night comes, and with it the hum of the wards. He walks the rooms, touching walls lightly the way a builder checks a house by listening to its bones. The mesh tells him where the pressure is. He writes notes with a stub of chalk. More water here, less pride there. Ask the trader to stop calling people peasants when she's trying to praise them. He drinks tea, which is the Compact's holy water, and sits on the threshold watching a line of people self-sort into needs and answers. He does not bless them. He counts them. He learns their names. He asks a man to come back in the morning with a broken pump and not to drink the alcohol that will keep him from doing so. He tells a young woman the truth about training. It is boring until it isn't. He shows a boy how to tie a knot that comes apart quickly when panicked hands pull. When he sleeps, the place between sits down beside his bed like a patient cat. It yawns an opinion. It asks for nothing. It purrs when he breathes steadily. If Bast is here, she approves. If she is not, The idea of her is more useful than most gods. In a city that loves banners, there is no banner for the compact. There is only a quiet door that stays shut for the right reasons and opens for the same. And in the books of people who keep books, someone makes a note. The deaths in this district fell this quarter. Fewer children disappeared into metaphors. There were fewer processions to nowhere and more to work. The Emperor was not offended enough to mention it. In a universe that weaponizes faith and grinds mercy into liturgy, a king built a small country in the shadow of a spire and dared it to survive. Would you walk through that door if you were hunted, knowing the Imperium might call you heretic for choosing sanctuary? And if the Black Panther took this compact to other hives, other worlds, how long before the rumor of a different way to live became a war worth fighting?